The Adams Family. Beginning with Henry Adams, a Puritan farmer who settled in the Massachusetts Bay Colony around 1636, this dynasty produced not wealth but ideas. John Adams, born in 1735, became the Atlas of Independence. He nominated George Washington to lead the Continental Army. He pushed Thomas Jefferson to write the Declaration of Independence, and he defended British soldiers after the Boston Massacre because he believed in the rule of law. His wife Abigail served as his closest political advisor, and her letters remain among the most important primary sources from the Revolutionary era. She famously urged him to remember the ladies when drafting new laws. John Adams then became the second president of the United States. His presidency brought controversy. In 1798, he signed the Alien and Sedition Acts, allowing the government to deport foreigners and prosecute those who criticized the administration. His son, John Quincy Adams, became the sixth president of the United States. After losing re-election, he went back to Congress, where he spent 17 years fighting against slavery. Charles Francis Adams, John Quincy Adams's son, served as ambassador to Britain during the Civil War. He is widely credited with preventing the British from recognizing the Confederacy. Had he failed, the war might have ended very differently. The Astor Family. John Jacob Astor arrived in Baltimore from Germany in 1784 with almost nothing. He began selling flutes. Decades later, he became America's first multimillionaire. His genius lay not in manufacturing, but in prediction. He entered the fur trade and dominated it through his American Fur Company, which ruthlessly eliminated competitors and used alcohol to exploit Native American tribes in trade negotiations. But Astor knew this wouldn't last forever. He pivoted to Manhattan real estate and purchased farmland in Upper Manhattan when the city ended at Canal Street. He correctly predicted the island's northward expansion. When he died in 1848, his estate was worth approximately $20 million. That equals over $100 billion today. His son, William Backhouse Astor Sr., became known as the landlord of New York. The family owned vast tenement buildings that housed the city's poor in squalid conditions. They were slumlords on a scale history never witnessed before. Caroline Schermerhorn Astor, the Mrs. Astor, created the 400, an exclusive list defining New York high society. Her son, John Jacob Astor IV, built the St. Regis Hotel and the Astoria wing of the Waldorf Astoria. He went down with the Titanic in 1912, one of the wealthiest men aboard. Today, the Astor name survives in the Waldorf Astoria brand, Astor Place in Manhattan, and the New York Public Library, built largely with Astor money. The Vanderbilt Family. In 1810, a 16-year-old Cornelius Vanderbilt started with $100 borrowed from his mother to operate a ferry between Staten Island and Manhattan. When he died in 1877, he was worth $105 million. This sum exceeded the cash reserves held in the United States Treasury. They called him the Commodore. He began with ferries, then steamships, then railroads. He bought competing lines, slashed prices until rivals went bankrupt, then raised prices once he held monopoly control. His tactics were brutal. When a reporter suggested he run trains for the public benefit, his son William Henry Vanderbilt famously snapped, "The public be damned." The Vanderbilts defined the Gilded Age. They built palatial homes that still stand as monuments to excess, the Breakers in Newport, Biltmore Estate in North Carolina, Grand Central Terminal in Manhattan. But unlike other dynasties, the Vanderbilts failed to preserve their wealth. They spent lavishly on mansions, parties, and European titles for their daughters. They created no significant philanthropic foundations. By the first family reunion in 1973, not a single millionaire remained among the 120 descendants present. The Pont Family. The DuPonts arrived in America on January 1, 1800. Fleeing the French Revolution, Eleuthère Irénée Dupont had studied chemistry under Antoine Lavoisier before the famous scientist was executed by guillotine. When Dupont went hunting in his new country, he noticed the poor quality of American gunpowder. He saw opportunity. Then he established a gunpowder mill on the Brandywine River in Delaware. The company became the primary supplier of explosives to the United States government. During the War of 1812, the Civil War, and the Spanish-American War, DuPont gunpowder killed America's enemies. By World War I, the company supplied 40% of all explosives used by the Allied powers. The Nye Committee, investigating the munitions industry in the 1930s, labeled them merchants of death. The DuPonts had profited enormously from global conflict, but they also transformed themselves. Under Lamet DuPont II, the company shifted from explosives to consumer chemicals. They invented nylon, Teflon, Kevlar, and rayon. They effectively created the plastic age. In 1996, family heir John DuPont shot and killed Olympic wrestler Dave Schultz at his estate. He was found guilty but mentally ill and died in prison in 2010. The DuPont Company, now DuPont de Nemours, remains one of the largest chemical corporations on Earth. The family still wields considerable influence in Delaware politics. The Morgan Family. J.P. Morgan was born in 1837 to a banking family with deep London connections. He then became the most powerful financier in American history. His method was simple. He would identify an industry plagued by ruinous competition, buy the major players, merge them into a single entity, and eliminate the chaos. He called this Morganization. He did it with railroads, electricity, creating General Electric. He did it with steel, forming U.S. Steel in 1901 as the world's first billion-dollar corporation. Morgan's true power became clear during the Panic of 1907. With banks failing across the country and no central bank to provide liquidity, Morgan personally halted the crisis. He summoned the leading bankers to his private library and locked the doors. He kept them there until they agreed to pool their resources to stabilize the markets. One man had saved the American economy because one man controlled the American economy. The government didn't like this kind of power. The Pujo Committee investigated the Money Trust in 1912, and within a year, Congress created the Federal Reserve System to ensure no private citizen would ever hold such authority again. His son, J.P. Morgan Jr., financed the Allied powers during World War I. Today, J.P. Morgan Chase and Morgan Stanley stand among the largest financial institutions on Earth. The Rockefeller Family. Born in 1839, John D. Rockefeller entered the oil refining business in Cleveland after the Civil War. The industry was chaos. Thousands of small refiners competed, prices swung wildly, and waste was everywhere. Rockefeller hated waste, he hated chaos, so he found Standard Oil in 1870. He negotiated secret rebates with railroads and bought competitors or destroyed them through predatory pricing. By 1880, Standard Oil controlled 90% of American oil refining. At his peak, in today's money, this equals between $300 and $400 billion. He literally built a monopoly, and antitrust laws was essentially written for him. In 1911, the Supreme Court ordered Standard Oil broken into 34 separate companies. Ironically, this breakup made Rockefeller richer, as he held stock in all of them. The Rockefellers then turned their attention to philanthropy on an unprecedented scale. They funded museums, universities, scientific researches through their Rockefeller Foundation, founded in 1913. John D.'s grandson, Nelson Rockefeller, served 4 terms as governor of New York and became vice president under Gerald Ford. Another of his grandson, David Rockefeller, ran Chase Manhattan Bank and operated as an unofficial diplomat, meeting with heads of state around the world. The Mellon Family. The family had arrived from Ireland in 1818. Thomas Mellon became a judge, then a banker in Pittsburgh. Thomas's sons, Andrew and his brother Richard, then built an empire through vertical integration. They invested in companies and turned them into monopolies. Alcoa controlled American aluminum. Gulf Oil controlled petroleum reserves. Carborundum dominated industrial abrasives. By the 1920s, the Mellons were arguably richer than the Rockefellers. Andrew Mellon served as Treasury Secretary for 3 consecutive presidents: Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. From 1921 to 1932, he shaped American economic policy more than any other individual. As Treasury Secretary, Andrew Mellon orchestrated massive tax cuts. He argued that reduced rates would stimulate investment. This became the template for Republican economic policy for a century. When the stock market crashed in 1929 and the Great Depression began, Democrats blamed Mellon. They argued that his policies had allowed the speculative bubble to inflate. He faced accusations of tax fraud while in office, though he was exonerated after his death. His gift to the nation was the National Gallery of Art in Washington, built to house his extraordinary collection. Today, BNY Mellon remains a major financial institution. Andrew's son, Paul Mellon, became one of America's greatest philanthropists and horse breeders, largely stepping away from the industrial legacy that had defined the family name. The Roosevelt Family. The Roosevelts split into 2 branches that would dominate American politics for nearly half a century. Theodore Roosevelt, from the Oyster Bay branch, became the 26th president in 1901 after William McKinley's assassination. He was 42 years old, the youngest president in American history. He busted trusts, built the Panama Canal, and doubled the number of national parks. He sent the Great White Fleet around the world to demonstrate American power. His 5th cousin Franklin Delano Roosevelt, from the Hyde Park branch, became the 32nd president in 1933. He was elected 4 times, the only president to serve more than 2 terms. He inherited the Great Depression and created the modern American welfare state: Social Security, the minimum wage, federal banking insurance. He led the nation through World War II, but died in April 1945, just months before victory. While always considered one of the greatest presidents, FDR did have some things that damaged his legacy. His Executive Order 9066 in 1942 authorized the internment of over 120,000 Japanese Americans. It remains one of the greatest civil liberties violations in American history. FDR's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, later helped draft the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You can say, for 19 of the 44 years between 1901 and 1945, a Roosevelt occupied the White House. The Kennedy family. It started in 1848 when Patrick Kennedy arrived in Boston from Ireland, fleeing the famine. He worked as a barrel maker and died of cholera 10 years later. His son, Patrick Joseph Kennedy, opened a saloon and entered local politics. PJ's son, Joseph Patrick Kennedy Sr., or simply Joe Kennedy, turned the family from saloon keepers into millionaires. He made money everywhere: banking, stock speculation, Hollywood film studios, and imported liquor. Whether he was a bootlegger during Prohibition remains debated, but the timing of his liquor import licenses was remarkably convenient. He used his money and influence to achieve something money was not supposed to be able to purchase: the presidency. Joe Kennedy managed, funded, and orchestrated John F. Kennedy's 1960 campaign with an efficiency that changed American politics. JFK became the 35th president at 43 years old, the youngest elected to the office and the first Catholic. His brother Robert served as Attorney General, taking on organized crime and becoming a leading voice for civil rights. His brother Ted entered the Senate in 1962, where he would serve for 47 years. But the price of power is tragic. We call it the Kennedy curse. JFK's eldest brother, Joe Kennedy Jr., had been killed in a World War II bombing mission in 1944. JFK's sister, Kathleen Kennedy, died in a plane crash in 1948. JFK was assassinated in Dallas in 1963. Robert was assassinated in Los Angeles in 1968. Ted Kennedy survived a plane crash in 1964, but saw his presidential ambitions destroyed by the Chappaquiddick incident in 1969. A young woman, Mary Jo Kopechne, drowned in a car he drove off a bridge. He did not report the accident for 10 hours. And JFK's son, John Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr., also died in a plane crash in 1999. The Kennedy name remains synonymous with American political aspiration today. The Bush family. The Bush dynasty merged Eastern establishment credentials with Texas oil culture. Prescott Bush attended Yale, joined Skull and Bones, partnered with Brown Brothers Harriman on Wall Street, then became a senator from Connecticut. Prescott Bush had been a director at Union Banking Corporation, whose assets were seized in 1942 under the Trading with the Enemy Act due to the bank's financial ties to Nazi Germany. His son, George Herbert Walker Bush, moved to Texas, made his fortune in oil, and entered politics. He served as congressman, ambassador to the United Nations, chief of the U.S. Liaison Office in China, and director of the Central Intelligence Agency before becoming vice president under Ronald Reagan. In 1988, he won the presidency. He oversaw the end of the Cold War and expelled Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. He lost re-election in 1992. His son, George W. Bush, became the 43rd president in 2001 after a contested election decided by the Supreme Court. 8 months into his presidency, terrorists attacked New York and Washington. He launched wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. The Iraq War was premised on intelligence claiming Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction. No such weapons were found.